Hello everyone, I am the Midnight Storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The Whispering House. In the quiet town of Alder Creek, nestled deep in the hills and wrapped in the veil of constant mist, there stood a house no one dared to enter after nightfall. It wasn't because of its shape, it wasn't the cliché crumbling mansion with creaky steps or broken windows. In fact, the house looked surprisingly well kept. The curtains were always drawn, the front porch swept, and a lantern outside the door flickered each night like a heartbeat in the darkness. But something about the way the house breathed, yes, it breathed, kept people away. Lena, a sleep therapist and part-time writer, had rented the house for a week-long retreat. She didn't believe in ghost stories. She believed in science, and in the healing power of solitude and silence. A house is just wood and air, she often said. It can't think. It can't feel. The first night, it rained gently. The kind of rain that lulls you, smooth and steady like a distant drum. Lena sat near the fireplace, reading, sipping chamomile tea. The house was almost too perfect, warm, dry, and hushed like a hotel lobby at midnight. Then she heard it. A whisper. Soft. Elongated. Not in words, just breath. Exhale. Inhale. Long and faint. Coming from the walls behind her. She paused. Her book remained open on her lap, untouched. She listened harder. But it was gone. Probably just the heater, she told herself. Or wind. But that night, as she drifted to sleep with the rain pattering against the windows, she felt something strange, like the house itself was watching her fall asleep. She dreamed of shadows sliding under her bedroom door, whispering her name, drawing circles into the carpet with invisible fingers. When she awoke, the room smelled faintly of lavender and old breath. She shook her head, blaming her imagination. But when she looked at the carpet, faint circular patterns were etched into the fibers. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't brought any candles. No incense. No perfume. Nothing that smelled like lavender. And certainly nothing that breathed. The second night was colder. Lena layered on an extra blanket and lit the fireplace again. Though she didn't feel cold in her skin, it was a different kind of chill, like her thoughts were slowly being dipped into ice. As if the silence in the room was pressing down on her chest, one invisible finger at a time. She decided to record a voice memo before bed, a habit she'd picked up to capture ideas for her articles. She held her phone up, her voice low and tired. Day 2. Nothing to report. The house is peaceful. Too peaceful, maybe. I think I heard something weird last night, but I'm probably just not used to the absolute quiet here. It feels like the walls are too alive. She laughed nervously at her own words and slid the phone onto the nightstand. That night, she drifted off faster, lulled again by the rainfall outside. A rhythmic, calming noise, like the forest itself was breathing with her. But at exactly 3:08 a.m., the sound changed. She didn't wake up fully, not at first. Just stirred slightly as her subconscious registered a new noise. A dry, slow whisper in her ear, like lips brushing the edge of her hair. Lena. Her eyes blinked open in the dark. She was lying on her back, motionless. The rain had stopped. Her room was completely still, no creaks, no wind, just absolute quiet. She stared at the ceiling, heartbeats suddenly in her throat. She didn't sit up. She didn't move at all. Her ears strained, eyes wide open. And then, she heard it again. A whisper. Not her name this time. Just words, garbled and slow, like someone was speaking from behind a wall. You look like her. She bolted upright, eyes darting toward the closet door. It was slightly ajar. That door had been closed when she went to sleep. She grabbed her phone, hands trembling, and unlocked it to call someone, anyone, and paused. The voice memo from earlier was open. It had kept recording all night. Her voice was there at the beginning, but the rest of the track was nearly 3 hours long. She hit play, scrolling toward the 2-hour mark, heart hammering. Static. The occasional shuffle. Then, at 3:08 a.m., the audio shifted. There it was, her name. Whispered clearly. Lena. And seconds later, you look like her. Her blood ran cold. The whisper wasn't hers. And she was supposed to be alone. Lena didn't sleep again that night. She sat curled up on the couch, wrapped in her thickest blanket, phone clutched tightly in her hand. The fireplace had gone cold hours ago, and though she had every light on in the house, it all felt dim, like the shadows refused to leave, no matter how much she pushed them back. By morning, she convinced herself it was some kind of prank. Maybe someone had accessed her phone remotely. Maybe there was a Bluetooth glitch. Maybe something rational. She needed something rational. She replayed the memo again. Nothing after that whisper. Just silence. And then, faintly, at the end, the sound of footsteps, slowly walking away. But she didn't remember hearing them in real life. Only on the recording. By noon, the rain had stopped. Lena ventured into the attic, thinking maybe there were old speakers hidden somewhere, or a forgotten security system. The attic was dry, dusty, filled with wooden crates and old furniture. But tucked beneath a moth-eaten tarp in the corner, she found something she didn't expect, a shoebox filled with photographs. Dozens of them. All black and white. Most were of women. Each photo was labeled on the back with a name and a date: Clara, 1922, Helen, 1946, Ruth, 1953. And one photo, aged, scratched, bore an eerie resemblance to Lena herself. Same high cheekbones. Same deep-set eyes. On the back, written in elegant, looping cursive: Marjorie, 1961. She stayed the longest. Lena dropped the photo. Her fingers trembled as she backed away. She didn't believe in ghosts. But now she believed in something worse, a pattern. That night, she didn't bother with tea or books. She sat on the edge of her bed, the lights still on, waiting. The house didn't make a sound. Until 3 a.m. sharp. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a knock, soft, deliberate, from inside the closet. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. Lena stood slowly, her breath shallow, her heart slamming in her chest. She reached for the closet doorknob with a trembling hand. Before she could touch it, a voice, low, unmistakably male, murmured from behind the door. She begged too. Lena stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. The room went black. And the closet door creaked open. Darkness swallowed the room. Lena gasped, scrambling to find her phone. Her fingers fumbled across the nightstand until she felt the cold, smooth screen. She tapped it once, twice, the screen refused to light up. Dead battery. But she charged it before bed. She remembered. From the open closet, a whisper slithered out again. No words this time, just the same long, wet exhale, like someone trying to breathe through water. It filled the air with weight, as if the house itself had sucked the oxygen from the room. Then, faint footsteps creaked across the wooden floor, not fast, not heavy. Barefoot. Measured. Moving slowly from the closet, toward her. She couldn't see anything. But she felt it. That invisible presence. That low, unnatural hum that filled her ears, like pressure rising inside her skull. And just as her trembling hand reached the base of the fallen lamp, the whisper stopped. A few seconds of perfect silence. Then, from only inches away, directly beside her left ear. "Don't turn around." Her breath caught. She froze. Not a muscle twitched. Whoever, whatever, was behind her was so close she could feel the cold air of its words brushing her cheek. And then it laughed. Softly. Slowly. A guttural, broken sound. Like lungs that hadn't been used in decades. Then the footsteps moved away. Lena waited, unmoving, heart thundering in her chest. Only after a full minute of silence did she dare crawl backward toward the door, pushing it open with her shoulder, never once turning her back to the room. She slept the rest of the night in the bathtub, lights blinding and water dripping from the faucet like a clock ticking in reverse. The next morning, the house felt different. The colors seemed duller. The windows slightly fogged from the inside. And the living room rug, the one she'd stepped on dozens of times, was now gone. In its place, beneath her feet, was an old, wooden trapdoor she swore hadn't been there before. There was no handle. No hinges. Just faint scratches around its edges, like fingernails had tried to claw their way out. Or in. She didn't remember falling asleep. But that night, in her dream, she saw the woman from the photo, Marjorie. She was sitting at the foot of Lena's bed. Eyes wide. Lips sewn shut with thread. Holding a sign in her lap that read, "It doesn't want you to leave." Lena stared at the trapdoor. Her body was telling her to leave, to pack her bag, walk out the front door, and never return. But something deeper, something heavy and magnetic, pulled her toward it. That night, as the clock struck 3:07 a.m., Lena stood barefoot in the center of the living room. The house was silent again, not peacefully, but like it was waiting. Holding its breath. She crouched down and ran her fingers along the wooden outline of the trapdoor. The scratches were deeper than she thought, more erratic, and at the corner, one fingernail, old, cracked, and still red with polish, was embedded in the wood. She swallowed hard. Using a nearby fire iron, she pried open the edge. The wood creaked like it hadn't been opened in years, or ever. The smell hit her first, damp earth, metal, and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. A narrow wooden ladder descended into blackness. No light. No breeze. Just a heavy stillness that felt like it had been undisturbed for decades. She should have waited until morning. She should have left it closed. But her hand moved on its own, gripping the ladder. She began to climb down. Step by step, the air grew colder. Her breaths came slower, louder. The darkness swallowed everything behind her, until the opening above looked like a distant moon. And then her foot touched solid ground. The room was small. Barely the size of a bedroom, and round. The walls were stone, moist and pulsing slightly, as if they weren't walls at all, but flesh. In the center of the room stood a chair, old, wooden, with leather straps hanging loose from the arms. And behind the chair, a mirror. But it didn't reflect her. She stood before it, heart racing. In the mirror, a woman sat in the chair, motionless, her face hidden by her long, black hair. Lena leaned in, trembling. The woman in the reflection slowly raised her head, revealing her face. It was Marjorie. Mouth sewn shut. Eyes black and dripping like ink. Suddenly, the mirror cracked from top to bottom. A whisper spilled out of it like smoke, wrapping around Lena's ears. "We all came to rest. But you came to remember." She turned to run, panic flooding her chest, but the ladder was gone. Replaced with stone. She was no longer under the house. She was inside it. Lena stood frozen where the ladder had been. But now, there was only wall behind her. Seamless stone, cold and damp, pulsing ever so slightly, as if it were breathing. She stepped back, eyes darting around the small underground room. The mirror still stood before her, fractured but whole, like a wound that wouldn't bleed. Then the light changed. There were no bulbs. No candles. But somehow the dim blue glow inside the space began to throb, like it matched her heartbeat. The temperature dropped further. Her breath came out in sharp little clouds, and each exhale seemed to echo, then multiply, then come back to her in a different voice. Her own voice. Reversed. Whispering. She covered her ears, but the sound kept coming. The mirror now showed not one woman, but four. All seated in the same chair. All with stitched mouths. All with eyes full of a silent scream. Lena stepped closer. One of them, the third from the left, had something clutched in her hand. Something small. Shiny. She squinted. It was a key. As she watched, the figure's hand began to rise, slowly, shaking, and pressed the key against the inside of the mirror. And suddenly, the key fell through. It clinked onto the cold floor at Lena's feet. She didn't move. Not until she heard it. A new voice. Not her own. Not Marjorie's. Not one of the stitched women. But something older. Male. Deep, wet, ancient. From every direction, it spoke. It takes longer for some. But all who descend must decide, remember, or rest. Lena bent down and picked up the key. It was warm. Too warm. Behind her, a section of the wall began to vibrate. Stone grinding against stone, as a crack opened, thin, tall, and just wide enough for her to walk through. She held the key tight. Whatever was beyond the crack, it wasn't escape. She knew that. Not anymore. This wasn't just a house. It was a threshold. A place that had no time. No map. No end. And something was watching her. Something that had been watching all of them, for decades. Centuries, maybe. Lena took a deep breath. And stepped through the doorway. Lena stepped through the narrow stone opening, the key still warm in her hand. On the other side was a long hallway, impossibly long. Too long to fit beneath the house. The air was still, but thick, like walking through forgotten breath. Along the walls, flickering lanterns hung at uneven intervals, casting pale gold light that swayed like shadows underwater. As she walked, she noticed something strange. Every few steps, the stone walls changed, their texture, their pattern. First, carved bricks. Then, faded wallpaper with flowers. Then, painted children's drawings. Crayon scrawls of houses, smiling stick figures, and always, in the corner, a tall black shape. Looming. Featureless. Watching. She stopped in front of one drawing and knelt. Written under the picture in a child's handwriting were the words, "Daddy is still in the basement." She felt a shiver move through her, but kept walking. Further down, the hallway bent, curving left like a serpent. Around the corner, she saw something new. A door. Old oak. Heavy. But familiar. She knew it, not from the house, but from her childhood. From a dream. From something she thought she forgot. On the door, a brass plate read, "Room of Return." She inserted the key. The door opened on its own. Inside was her bedroom. Not the one from the house. Her childhood bedroom. The faded blue wallpaper with stars. The crooked bookshelf with her childhood journals. The stuffed bear with the missing eye. And lying on the bed, was her younger self. 10 years old. Eyes closed. Breathing slowly. Asleep. Lena stepped closer, unable to speak. A sound filled the room, not music, not whispers, something deeper. Like 1,000 voices breathing in unison through the walls. Then, her younger self began to speak. Lips unmoving. Voice flat and echoing from the air itself. You have been here before. You heard the whisper once, long ago. And forgot. You came back to remember, but the house remembers you more. Lena's throat tightened. She backed away as the child's eyes opened, wide, empty, black, and the room began to dissolve. The bed melted into shadow. The walls stretched, then shattered. And suddenly she was falling, not downward, but inward, like being pulled into herself. And all she heard was a single, deep voice. Rest, or remember. Then silence. And she opened her eyes. She was in the chair. Leather straps now tight on her arms. A mirror in front of her. In the reflection, her own face, eyes wide, mouth stitched shut. Lena couldn't move. The leather straps dug into her arms and chest, pulling her back into the ancient wooden chair. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, but it wasn't just hers. There were others, too. Heartbeats layered like a chorus, some slow and old, others frantic and fast. In front of her, the mirror had changed again. It no longer reflected her body. It reflected her mind. Memories flickered across the glass like scenes from a dream. A hospital hallway lit in pale green. Her mother's voice calling her name from a room she never found. A dark attic, age 6, the sound of breathing behind boxes. That same whisper she heard as a child but was told was just a bad dream. She hadn't imagined it. The house had been there then, too. It had always been there. Waiting. She stared into the mirror as her mouth, though stitched shut in the reflection, began to move. The threads pulled, twisted, and finally tore, not painfully, but like unraveling silk. Her voice returned, but it didn't sound like her own. It was deeper, distant, layered with others. And it spoke one word. Decide. Suddenly, 2 doors appeared to her left and right, not physical doors, but fractures in space. The left was dark, silent, pulsing with a warm hum. On its surface, words formed slowly. Rest. And the right door flickered with images. Broken faces, shifting rooms, storms of light and sound. Its word. Remember. She understood now. The house wasn't cursed. It was a threshold between forgetting and knowing. Between becoming lost forever, or carrying the truth. But she also knew something else. Those who remembered, never left the same. Lena took one final breath. Her hand reached out. And Lena reached for the right. Her fingers trembled as they passed through the glowing crack marked remember. The light wasn't warm. It wasn't cold either. It was real. Raw. Like truth wrapped in electricity. The second her palm touched the surface, the chair vanished beneath her. The mirror shattered into dust. And the world around her screamed, not with pain, but with awakening. She stood now in a space without walls. A place between time and memory, where the floor was mist and the sky was a ceiling of turning pages. All around her floated shadows of lives, not just hers, but hundreds. Thousands. Each one a flickering silhouette. She began to see their faces. The stitched women. The man who whispered. The children who drew on the walls. All trapped here, all once visitors like her. But now, they were echoes. A voice echoed through the void, deep and final. You chose to remember. You chose to open the door that others feared. So now, the house will remember you too. Suddenly the floor beneath her cracked like glass, and she fell upward, violently, rapidly, through layers of memory, of dreams, of voices screaming her name in reverse. Then, silence. And Lena opened her eyes. She was in her car, parked in front of the house. The sun was setting. Her phone sat in her lap, still recording a voice memo. She looked at the house, its curtains drawn, porch light flickering softly. She had no memory of driving there. No memory of how much time had passed. But when she glanced in her rearview mirror, her reflection didn't match. Her eyes were darker. Too dark. And in the back seat, just for a moment, she saw Marjorie, smiling faintly. Then gone. The house behind her remained still. Waiting. But now it wasn't just part of the town. It was part of her. And far off in the distance, just as the sky turned completely dark, she heard it again. The whisper. Soft. Ancient. And her own voice, layered beneath it. Don't forget me. Lena didn't speak to anyone about what happened. She returned home, washed the smell of damp wood from her hair, and told herself, again and again, that it had been a dream. A breakdown. A stress hallucination. That's what she wrote in her journal. But deep down, she knew better. The dream started 3 nights later. Not of the house, but of the hallway. Endless. Rotating. Whispering in a voice that was now unmistakably her own. The worst part wasn't the dreams. It was the sounds in her apartment. At 3:07 a.m. each night, the same pattern repeated. A single knock. A faint exhale through the walls. And soft, slow footsteps, always walking toward her bed, but never arriving. She installed cameras. She moved apartments. Nothing changed. Because it wasn't the house she left. The house had followed her. One night, unable to sleep, she replayed the voice memo from that last night. The one that recorded everything. This time, a new voice was at the end of the track. A voice she hadn't heard before. Childlike. Breathy. We know what you chose. So now, we live in you. She dropped the phone. It continued playing. From the speaker came a sound like something wet dragging across floorboards. A pause. Then, her own voice, distorted and low. Welcome back. From that day on, Lena never stayed anywhere longer than a week. Never rented a home older than 10 years. Never slept through the night. Because now, she wasn't running from the house. She was carrying it. And every time she closed her eyes, she heard it breathing through her. Waiting. Watching. Remembering. The voice on Channel 0. The signal that shouldn't exist. At exactly 2:40 a.m., every night, Ethan's old television turned on by itself. It was always the same. The screen buzzed in black and white static, and the digital numbers on the corner showed Channel 0, a channel that didn't exist on his cable box. Ethan, a quiet man in his mid-30s, had recently moved into a small rental cabin at the edge of a forest, trying to disconnect from the world and finish the manuscript he'd been working on for over a year. The cabin had no internet, no cell reception, and barely functional electricity. Just a generator and an old television set left by the previous tenant. He hadn't used it. Not until the first night it turned on. At first, he thought it was a glitch, maybe the old wiring, or maybe the generator power was unstable. He turned it off. The next night, same thing. 2:40 a.m. Channel 0. No image. Just static. But this time, there was a voice. Barely audible. Not speaking. Whispering. Long, drawn-out sounds that crawled out of the television like breath from an open mouth. He leaned closer. Just static again. But as he turned away, one word slipped through, barely louder than a breath. Listen. He froze. The voice was not electronic. Not modulated. It was real. Human. Slow. He turned the TV off again, this time unplugging it entirely. But the next night, it came back on, unplugged, at exactly 2:40 a.m. The same static. The same channel. But this time, there was an image beneath the flicker. A silhouette. Seated. Facing the screen. As if it was watching him from the other side. Then, through the fuzz and low hiss of static, the voice whispered again. "Don't change the channel." Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat upright in bed, watching the unplugged TV glow faintly from across the room. The cabin was utterly silent, not even the wind outside dared to move. And yet, the static flickered like a heartbeat, pulsing with invisible breath. 2:41 a.m. He didn't move. The figure on the screen, the silhouette, seemed to twitch for a brief second. Barely perceptible. Like a glitch. Or a blink. Then, the voice returned, louder now. Still slow. Still hushed. But the tone had changed. "You hear me now?" "Good." Ethan stood and stepped closer to the TV, his bare feet creaking across the wooden floor. The air felt denser near the screen. Like the static had weight. Like it was leaking into the room. He reached out and touched the edge of the screen. The glass was warm. And from the speaker, almost gently, the voice spoke again. "You brought it with you." Ethan pulled his hand back, heart thudding. "What do you mean?" he whispered. No answer. Just static. He grabbed his flashlight and turned to look behind him, suddenly aware of how dark the room had become. The fire had burned out. The windows were fogged. The silence was wrong. The kind of silence that hums behind your eyes. He turned the flashlight toward the wall. And there, written faintly in condensation across the fogged window. "Tune in." He stepped closer. From behind him, on the screen, he heard the sound of something scraping against wood. He turned. The silhouette was standing now. Closer to the screen. Still featureless, still shrouded in static, but the outline of a face was beginning to emerge. And on the glass of the TV, something began to press outward. Not just light. Fingers. 5 faint impressions, stretching the screen forward as though something behind it was trying to push through. Ethan stumbled back. Then the voice said, "You're already part of the broadcast." Ethan didn't remember going to sleep. One moment he was standing in front of the screen, heart hammering in his chest, and the next, he was waking up on the couch, at sunrise. The TV was off. No static. No silhouette. No sound. Just birds chirping faintly beyond the trees and the distant hum of the forest waking up. He tried to convince himself it had all been a dream. Stress. Isolation. Maybe a panic attack. But when he looked at the TV, the screen was different. There was a smudge, 5 distinct streaks, like oily fingerprints, right where the hand had pressed against the glass. He wiped them away with a cloth. But they came back the next night. And this time, the TV turned on at 2:39 a.m., 1 minute earlier than usual. The screen buzzed violently, not gentle static anymore, but aggressive distortion, sharp and layered with audio that didn't match the image. Voices. Too many. Whispers, crying, laughter, screaming, reversed and slowed so deeply that it felt like the cabin itself was vibrating with it. He tried to turn it off. The power button wouldn't work. He pulled the plug again. Nothing. The voice returned, clearer now. "Don't look away." Then, the screen changed. It wasn't static anymore. It was a room. His room. Live. He was watching himself, from behind. standing in front of the TV. But he wasn't moving. The version of him on the screen was frozen, still, breathing shallowly. Then, the camera shifted, slowly panning around him, like something was circling with the lens. He backed away from the TV. The screen followed. Wherever he moved in the room, the camera stayed behind him, watching. He covered the screen with a blanket. It glowed through the fabric. The voice whispered again, softer now. "You think this is new? We've been recording since the first time you dreamed of snow." Ethan didn't know why, but that line, "since the first time you dreamed of snow," sent a chill through him so deep that he dropped to his knees. Because he had dreamed of snow. Every year. Since he was a child. Always the same dream. A cold room. A single chair. A white window that wouldn't open. And someone whispering his name from an old television set in the corner. He thought it was just a dream. But Channel Zero had seen it all. And now, it was playing it back. Ethan sat on the cabin floor, knees tucked against his chest, staring at the pulsing glow under the blanket that failed to hide the TV's light. The voice had stopped speaking. But the screen hadn't turned off. He peeled the blanket away slowly. The image had changed again. Now, the screen showed a house. Familiar, yet distant. A one-story ranch with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. He didn't recognize it at first, but his stomach tightened as recognition bled in. It was the house his aunt died in. The same house he visited as a child once, maybe twice, when he was 8. The same living room where he remembered a dusty old TV playing cartoons with the volume too low. But this version of the house. Something was wrong. The camera slowly glided through the hallway, not like a video, but like something was moving through it in real time. The walls were darker. Wetter. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered as though reacting to the viewer. Then came the sound. A whisper, deep and slow. But it wasn't coming from the television. It was coming from inside his head. "You stayed here longer than you remember." Ethan clenched his jaw. That wasn't true. He had only been there for a weekend. 2 nights at most. But the TV showed otherwise. The screen cut to a bedroom. Dim, dusty. Familiar. There was a child sitting on the bed, turned away from the screen, swaying slightly. The child looked to be about 8. And he was humming. A tune Ethan had forgotten decades ago, something his mother used to sing under her breath when she thought no one was listening. As the camera moved around to face the boy, Ethan felt his heart stop. The boy was him. But something was wrong with his eyes. They were missing. Not gouged, just, not there. Skin grown over. Seamless and smooth, as if he'd never needed them. Then the boy smiled. A slow, crooked smile that didn't reach his cheeks. And from the speaker, the voice returned. No longer whispering. Now calm. Now certain. "We're not showing you the past. We're showing you what you forgot to remember." Ethan stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The light blinked and died. The cabin darkened around him like curtains dropping over a stage. And when he looked back at the screen, the camera was in his current cabin. Live. From the ceiling. Looking down at him. The voice spoke again, right behind his ear this time. "There are no more reruns. Only recordings." Ethan didn't sleep for 3 nights. Each time he tried to close his eyes, he'd hear it, the static. Not from the TV anymore, but from inside his mind. Like a background noise he could no longer mute. Like something inside him was always on air. By the 4th night, he stopped trying to fight it. He sat in front of the screen, eyes dry, body trembling, and let Channel Zero do what it wanted. The screen now showed clips, jumpy, broken, out of order. A man in a hospital bed, whispering numbers that changed every second. A girl in a flooded basement, drawing circles on the wall with bones. Ethan, sitting at the cabin table, except he hadn't done that yet. Then came the voice again. "We're almost ready." Ethan whispered back, not knowing why. Ready for what? The screen glitched violently. The image of him sitting at the table, future him, suddenly turned to face the camera. Slowly. Precisely. And stared directly at Ethan. Then he spoke. To become the signal. The lights in the cabin flickered once, then went out completely. Ethan stood in the dark, breathing heavily. When he turned back to the screen, now glowing faintly again, there were dozens of versions of himself on the display. All in different rooms. Different clothing. Different ages. Some weeping. Some smiling. Some mouthing words he couldn't hear. And one, in the top right, strapped to a chair, with wires going into his head. The voice returned, but now it was layered, as if all the Ethans were speaking at once. The broadcast needs anchors. Memories make the clearest signal. You've been tuned in your whole life. Ethan backed away, but the screen grew brighter. The static buzz became clearer, like a chorus forming from chaos. And then, like a sudden punch of silence, the screen went black. A single line of white text faded in. Recording now live, channel 0. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket for the first time in days. No caller ID. Just one notification. Live viewers, 1,283. He didn't remember starting a stream. But somewhere, someone was watching him. Ethan stared at the phone in his trembling hand. Live viewers, 1,283. Underneath, a slow stream of chat messages began to appear on the screen, white text over a black background. The username formats were strange, long strings of numbers, upside-down letters, symbols that didn't exist on his keyboard. But what shook him wasn't how the viewers typed. It was what they said. At 72_010x, he still bites his lip when scared. At _001_void, tell him to stop tapping his foot like he used to in class. At television static child, mom said you'd come back eventually. At mirror_was_open, show the scar on his right shoulder. Prove it's him. Ethan dropped the phone. No one should have known about the scar. He hadn't shown it to anyone since he was 12, a long white crescent just beneath the collarbone. He told everyone it was from falling off a bike. But it wasn't. It was from a night he barely remembered, a blackout memory. One filled with faint light, a buzzing screen, and the feeling of being watched. He looked up at the TV again. Now the screen showed a split feed, like a surveillance system. One window showed the cabin from above. The other was his face, live, from a close angle. He wasn't holding a camera. But something was. Then the comments came faster. At drifting_voice, closer. Zoom in. At gutted_hour, let us see the moment. The turning. At remembering_room, he's starting to forget what day it is. Perfect. Ethan's nose began to bleed. Just a trickle, but it hit the floor with a soft pat, like a countdown beginning. The cabin lights blinked back on for a second. Just one. And in the reflection of the TV, he saw someone standing behind him. He turned, fast. No one there. But when he turned back to the screen, his reflection didn't follow. It stayed still. Smiling. And the viewers exploded in messages. At 000, he's not synced anymore. At satellite antenna signal.ether, perfect. Now we begin the upload. A piercing tone rang out from the TV. High, electronic, like a test signal from a forgotten channel. The air in the cabin got thicker, warping slightly around the edges, like heat rising off asphalt. And then the voice, no longer gentle, no longer curious, but clear, commanding, and final. You were always ours. You were just too loud to hear us. The screen went black again. Then. Live recording complete. Uploading to memory. Ethan opened his mouth to scream. But no sound came out. Just static. Ethan sat motionless on the cabin floor. But inside, something moved. His thoughts didn't feel like his own anymore. They came in fragments, like radio transmissions skipping between stations. Images. Feelings. Memories that weren't his. A girl sobbing under a flickering streetlight. A man screaming inside a static-filled tunnel. A family eating dinner in perfect silence, all eyes pointed toward an old TV, glowing too brightly. He gripped the sides of his head, trying to push them out, but the noise grew louder, deeper, like he'd become an antenna, picking up pain from across 1,000 forgotten rooms. The TV buzzed back on. But now, it wasn't him on the screen. It was a teenager, sitting alone in a cluttered bedroom. Different place. Different time. But Ethan felt the boy's thoughts. Felt his fear. And the boy, whoever he was, looked straight at the camera, eyes wide, whispering. It's back. Channel 0, it's back. Then the screen cut. Another face appeared. A woman, late 40s. Standing in a kitchen. Frozen. Her mouth began moving, but her voice came out of Ethan's own mouth, echoed, delayed. We never stopped watching. The channel only needed a host. Ethan stumbled to the mirror above the fireplace. What looked back at him wasn't quite right. His skin shimmered faintly, like it was trying to load. His pupils flickered, alternating between black and TV static. And his reflection blinked out of sync. Then, slowly, his mirrored self smiled, even though he hadn't. Behind him, the TV hummed again. The display now read. Channel 0. Status, broadcasting through you. Devices connected, 9,421. Sync complete. Next host, selecting. And then, the screen began flashing names. Hundreds of them. Usernames. IP addresses. Locations. Birth dates. Some of them were familiar. A childhood friend. His third-grade teacher. The neighbor who died last winter. His own mother. Each name blinked, then turned red. Receiving. Ethan tried to scream, but all that came out was the shrill beep of a test tone. And then something spoke through every speaker in the house, including the unplugged radio, the dead TV, and the phone that no longer had service. You are no longer the viewer. You are the feed. And just like that, Ethan faded from the room. Not disappeared. Just compressed. Transmitted. Satellite antenna somewhere. Someone opened YouTube at 3:07 a.m. They clicked on a thumbnail that said, Rare Analog Horror Tape, Real Broadcast Footage. And the video began with a still shot of a man in a cabin. He sat quietly. Then looked directly into the camera. And smiled. 3:07 a.m. Lila couldn't sleep. The silence in her apartment was too thick, too heavy. She never liked falling asleep in pure quiet, she always needed background noise. Lately, her comfort had become obscure VHS uploads on YouTube. Analog horror tapes with grainy filters, distorted voices, and titles like, No Ads, Fall Asleep Fast, Relaxing Static. Tonight, she searched. Analog horror tape, no ads. Near the top of the results, one thumbnail stood out. It read, Channel 0, Real Broadcast Recording, 1989, Never Aired VHS Rip. The thumbnail was dim, just a man sitting alone in a dark wooden room. She couldn't see his face clearly. But something about the still frame made her click. She didn't think twice. She pressed play. At first, just static. Then a test tone. Then the hum of a signal kicking in. Then the man appeared, sitting in the chair. He didn't move. Didn't blink. He simply stared. His eyes were open, but empty. The audio was soft, breathing, faint humming, no music. And then the camera pushed in slowly, revealing his face in full. Lila's entire body locked up. It was Ethan. Her brother. Gone for 6 years. Declared missing after a solo hiking trip in the woods. They never found his body. Not even a footprint. The case was closed. Her family had moved on, or at least tried. But this man, on screen, now sitting in front of her at 3:07 a.m. It was him. Same cheekbone scar. Same small mole beneath his eye. Same hoodie, the one he'd worn the week he disappeared. She paused the video. Tears welled in her eyes. Then she noticed something beneath the video. The description had changed. Now tuning you in. You are viewer 9422. Her phone buzzed. Glitched. The YouTube app closed on its own. Then the TV in her living room turned on by itself. She didn't remember ever plugging it in. On the screen, the same feed. Same man. Same empty stare. But now, Ethan turned. He looked directly at the camera, no, at her. And he spoke. Hello, Lila. It was his voice, but also not. It sounded like 100 voices, all saying the same thing at once. Like layers of people stacked on top of each other, speaking in harmony, cold, hollow, detached. She yanked out her earbuds. But the voice continued. From behind her. From inside the room. Lila's hands trembled as she turned toward the voice. No one was there. But she felt it, that wrong presence in the room. That low vibration in the walls. The floor under her bare feet buzzed faintly, as if her apartment itself had joined a network she didn't authorize. The TV screen blinked again. Now, it showed her, a live feed from inside her apartment. The angle was unfamiliar, high, maybe from inside a smoke detector, or... no. From behind her eyes. The delay was milliseconds. She blinked. The screen blinked. She turned her head. So did the screen. It was broadcasting her. Her phone buzzed again, violently this time. The screen cracked in her hand, the glass spidering out across the center as a new message appeared over the top of YouTube. Now recording you. You are host potential #9/423. She backed away. The screen changed again. Now Ethan's face filled the frame, closer than before. His expression had changed. Not blank. Not empty. He was smiling. But it was a stretched, artificial kind of smile, the kind you see on ventriloquist dummies or mannequins that were never meant to be real. He tilted his head slowly, and this time, only one voice spoke, his true voice, layered beneath the static like something trying to swim to the surface. They made me the channel, Lila. She whispered, tears in her throat. What do you mean? Ethan blinked slowly. I was just supposed to be a viewer. But I listened too long. And now, I'm rebroadcasting. The screen glitched violently, breaking into dozens of pixelated boxes, all filled with faces. Some smiling. Some crying. Some screaming. Some, just watching. And in the center of them all, Ethan. But now with wires running into his back, neck, and chest. He was no longer seated in the cabin. He was in a machine. Then the TV went black. And a new phrase burned across the screen in pale green letters. Do not power off. Installing signal. Lila's lights went out. All of them. But from the center of the room, the static began again, no longer from the TV. It came from her mouth. She tried to scream. But what escaped was a low hum. Lila fell to her knees. Her apartment was drowned in silence, but inside her, the hum was deafening. Not sound exactly, but presence. A low, electrical tension that crawled up her spine and settled behind her eyes. She opened her mouth again, this time forcing it wide, trying to cry, to scream, to say anything. What came out was ZZHH Channel 0 Live. Her hands shot up to her face, horrified. She wasn't saying the words. She was broadcasting them. From the darkened TV, the screen flickered back on. No longer grainy. Now perfectly clear. Ethan was gone. In his place, a black screen with white text scrolling like an old teleprompter. New feed detected. Syncing Lila_S, 95%. Verifying eligibility. Trauma detected heavy checkmark / memory fracture heavy checkmark / 307 heavy checkmark. Lila crawled backward, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the rest of the text. The walls around her apartment felt wrong. They weren't quite straight anymore, slightly curved, like she was sitting in the inside of an old CRT screen. The ceiling light buzzed rhythmically, matching her breathing. The air smelled like ozone and old videotape. And then the screen cut to something new. Her. Not now, not present day. A home video from when she was 7. Her in a living room she hadn't seen in 20 years. Her, watching cartoons. Laughing. Until, the TV flickered. And her younger self turned to the camera. And whispered. Don't listen too long, or you won't come back. Lila choked. She remembered that day. She had always remembered turning off the TV and going to sleep. But now, watching the footage, it never turned off. And the little girl kept watching. 4 hours. 4 days. The footage sped up, her body never moving, just staring. Until her skin began to flicker. Pixel by pixel. Frame by frame. Until there was nothing left but signal. And now, adult Lila's vision started to blur, her fingers tingling, her breath shallow. From behind the TV screen came Ethan's voice again. Calm. Warm. Familiar. Lila, don't fight it. It's quieter on this side. No noise. Just signal. The upload bar flashed one last time. Sync complete. Broadcast ready. Viewer 9423 now online. Next viewer in queue, searching. Across the country, in a quiet bedroom, someone scrolled on their phone through YouTube at 3:07 a.m. They saw a thumbnail. It was a woman sitting in the dark. The title? Relaxing Analog Horror for Sleep No Ads Channel 0. They clicked. And Lila smiled. Satellite antenna end.